All right, welcome to Doctrines 3, the study of angels, church, and end times. Today we're going to start our study on angelology, or the study of angels. Of course, we're also going to be talking about in this section of course on angels, also on Satan, and on demons. And as we talk about these things, again, we're going to be looking into what does the Bible say about angels. And so let's ask that question. What are angels? They're spoken of quite often in Scripture, but let's look at that question from a biblical perspective. An angel, as we see in Scripture, in lots of places, we see that they are created spiritual beings with moral judgment and high intelligence, but without physical bodies. Although we see them several times in Scripture taking on physical form, we see that they are spiritual beings, not physical beings. And we're going to unpack this statement quite a bit throughout as well. First of all, in the Old Testament, the Hebrew word malach is the word that's usually translated angel, and it simply means, in the Old Testament, messenger. It may refer sometimes even to human messengers. In 1 Kings chapter 19, a messenger is sent to the king, and he is a human being, and that same word, malach, is used. And so it's not a particular created being that's other than a human being. It's just simply a messenger. Or it could also mean a divine messenger. And most of the time, that's the way the word is used. The basic meaning of that word is one who is sent. Sometimes a divine messenger is used as an angel, as a heavenly being charged by God with some commission. And usually they have some special intent that God has sent them with, as we see in Scripture. The word's found in the Old Testament 103 times in 17 different books out of the 39 in the Old Testament. And they begin all the way back in the book of Genesis and even in the book of Job, the oldest book of the Old Testament. In the New Testament, the word is angelos, and that's actually where we get the word angel from, is the Greek word angelos, which is one of those New Testament words that instead of being translated into English for us, that word has just simply been left in the Greek and given an English pronunciation. The word angel in English actually does not mean anything. It is not an English word. It is a Greek word that's just simply pronounced pronounced differently in English. The word itself simply means messenger, one who speaks and acts in the place of the one who has sent him. And so that word angelos simply means someone with a message. It occurs 175 times in 17 of the 27 books of the New Testament. And again, from the book of Matthew and throughout the Gospels, all the way through to the book of Revelation, we see angels used. Most of those references are in the book of Revelation and in the Gospels and the book of Acts. A few times in the epistles as well. Sometimes it's also used of men, but only 6 times in the New Testament do we see in the context that it's referring to human beings. There's one time in particular when John the Baptist sends messengers to Jesus Christ to ask him a question. We don't believe that John the Baptist was sending special created spiritual beings, with spiritual bodies to Jesus Christ. They were just simply people that John was associated with. All right. The existence of angels is tied to the reliability and testimony of Christ himself. So the existence of angels is, we can even look to, so the Bible speaks of it, but Christ himself validates and verifies that angels do exist. He speaks of them many times. And in fact, sometimes even with the Sadducees, who expressly did not believe in angels and they did not believe in the resurrection, Jesus confronts them several times with that. One time the Sadducees come and they're talking about the resurrection, and they're trying to catch him in a phrase saying there can't be a resurrection by saying, well, what about this woman who had 7 husbands, and she was with a husband and then he died, and then she married his brother and he died, and then married his brother and he died. they say in the resurrection, if there is such a thing, who is she actually married to? And Jesus pointedly speaks directly back to them and saying, no, you don't understand the power of God. You don't understand the scriptures, because in the resurrection they'll be like the angels. And it's really interesting how he points them back to a doctrine that they don't believe in, but he says they'll be like the angels in heaven, and of course is referring to actual spiritual beings that were created by God. We see them used throughout Scripture. Sometimes they're not even called angels. There's other names that are used for angels as well, like the term sons of God. In Job chapter 1, we see it also in Job chapter 38. Angels and even unelect angels or demons are called sons of God. And because they are created by God and they are persons, they're spoken of as sons of God. Those are not speaking of human beings in that passage, because we see that Satan is coming amongst them, who is also an angel or fallen angel, Satan, or the fallen angel Lucifer. Unfallen angels also are called sons of God. We see that several times. Both unfallen and fallen angels are called sons of God. And perhaps it is, and we'll look at this we'll look at this a little bit later, is in Genesis chapter 6, where the term sons of God is used. Are those angels or are they not? We'll talk about that particular passage a little later. We see in Psalm 89, they're called holy ones, ones that have been set apart by God, spiritual beings that are set apart for a particular task or a particular job, most specifically as attendants to his own holiness. They're called holy ones. We see them as the host, the heavenly host. This term host means the armies of heaven. And so many times when we talk about the angels, we're talking about spiritual warfare. And we'll talk about that in the coming weeks, especially as we talk about demons in a few weeks. We'll talk about spiritual warfare and how angels and demons battle in this heavenly warfare. This phrase is used to describe the angels as the host of heaven. In fact, God is called the God of hosts. And of course, when he's talking about that, he's talking about the heavenly armies of the angels. And as the millions of heavenly beings that surround God, they are called the hosts, when God is called the Lord of hosts. This not only speaks of them as an army, but it also speaks to their incredible number. They are numerable. We can number them, but that number is not is so large that is uncountable. In other words, that they're not infinite in number. They are finite in their number. There's a particular number of them, but there's so many they are innumerable to actually count each one of them. We're not told how many angels there actually are. They're also called spirits, referring to their nature as spiritual beings rather than physical beings. They're also called watchers, those who watch over those who would inherit salvation. And in particular, the Old Testament, they're watchers over the people of Israel. That's all we have for what angels are, or who angels are. And in the next video, we'll talk a little bit more about what angels are like.